And so I'm going to say you're about negative zero point 0.3, right up there with Ronnie.
I would say if his legs are anything like mine, it's a little
Oh, you sent
ambiguous,
it.
but I mean that looks like a plus or
Oh, well.
minus 10% to me.
Yeah, I was going to say that's
Yeah.
probably like a legit 10.
Yeah. That's what I would say as well, because I think that it's a pretty good kind of general rule of thumb is like when you start looking lean, so like you almost have the same kind of ab definition as this guy. Or will this be put on the screen, this picture?
Yeah,
Or
we can put it up.
yeah. So you might actually have a similarly good like ab definition. Chest might look as defined as this guy's, but you still have some like nice, healthy, like muscly padding on your shoulders and all of those things. Then you're probably in the low teens. And that's actually why I think for most people that's a good endpoint during a cut. And not that this guy doesn't look good, like he looks awesome, but like you start having this angular look to you when you get to like that legit 10% mark, like the shoulders start looking a bit like this square.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of how it is often. Looks like
Yeah. You kind of lose a little bit of the soft padding almost like underneath the armpit, like lat area, and it gives you, like you're saying, that more like angular appearance. I just noticed that recently with me as I've dropped into the mid 180s more consistently. I feel like I catch glimpses of myself and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. It's kind of, I'm used to having that like softer padding in the lat area back there.
Right.
I think it's almost the only people that I think it's really worth going down there, unless it's for some personal challenge or something, is those that just have like a very body fat distribution that doesn't favor the look that they want. So like if someone wants to have like a really good six pack and they have like a very central fat storage pattern, so then you may need to go down to 10 to have the look that someone else might have at 13 or something. But otherwise, I think it's just not worth it often.
Yeah. So let's start off by pointing out that Abel has abandoned Hat Boys today.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too.
Yeah.
No commitment.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good guessing game for the viewers, like who is gonna be the one opting out next summer.
I like last time we had beanies on too. This time it's baseball hats.
2 times ago was beanies. Last time I did abandon the hat, but you doubled up with the hoodie. So
that's right.
Yeah.
So Bryan, you're down into the low 180s now?
No, mid 180s. The last 2 days have been 184.6. But my low for the diet is 184.2, and that was 9 days ago. So literally I hit 184.2 and then it bounced back up to like 187, 186, 185, and then finally now back down into the 184s. And this just kind of seems to be the way it's going. Like every time that I hit a new low, it like goes up 3 pounds and then like gradually works its way back down to a new low again.
Yeah, interesting.
What's the biggest daily, like, sorry, I'm not the host here, but what's the biggest daily fluctuation that you guys will tend to have? I don't know if you do that, like you weigh in after the gym, before shower or something, but
I always do it in the morning after the morning bathroom routine. And this diet, I have literally not taken a single refeed the entire 10 plus weeks, which has been the first time I've ever taken this approach. So it's been much more predictable. It basically hangs out every morning within a 2.5 pound range. Whereas when I was doing the refeeds, it was, all over the place.
Yeah, refeeds are definitely, something Abel and I've had pretty extensive podcasts on, that it just makes things. I mean, I'm a fan of refeeds, but like even if, for example, while dieting, it's all over the place. But even not dieting, for example, I'm sitting about like 195, and over the weekend I'll just like eat more. So it's not really a refeed, but you can call it a cheat, whatever you want to call it. And pretty consistently, it'll bump me up like a couple of pounds, and I'll go down, bump up a couple of pounds. And this past weekend, I went to North Carolina to visit a friend, ate a ton of junk, and I bumped up to 199, and then the next day was like 196.8. So I'm like, all right, I'll be back to my 195 within a couple of days. Then it was 196.6, 196.8, 196.8. Today, this morning, I'm 197.2, even though I've consciously been eating less than I normally would throughout the week, like significantly less, now I'm probably eating more volume because I'm hungrier because I'm eating less. But the point is, I'm up 2 pounds from last Monday, even though I've had probably a maintenance of calories if you were to average everything. But and as I've mentioned many times, my body is all over the place with water retention and whatnot. So even more so when dieting. So I'm just saying it does. I definitely concur that it kind of screws things up mentally if it bothers you.
Yeah. The type of food you're eating really matters too. Cause like I went on vacation recently, like last weekend, and I kept my calorie average right where I more or less wanted it to be. Like every day was between 2,300 and 3,000. So it was like a 27-ish average. And when I got back from that vacation, I was up, 2.5, 3 pounds. Like it was on the higher end of what I would expect to be up. And just like your story, I've been eating less, for many days in a row. And it took 5 days before it finally like got back down into where I kind of expected it to be. So maybe a little delayed effect or something there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like what's crazy to me is, I mean, I haven't been doing this for a long time, but especially in the summer, what I would do is I would weigh in the morning, and then I would go to the gym sometime in the afternoon, and then I come home, take a shower, and then before that, like the scale is right there, so I just step on it. And usually like sometimes it would be kind of amazing how light I would be, even compared to my morning weigh-in. Evening weigh-in, of course, like that almost doesn't count because like it just depends on how much volume of food you've eaten. But in the morning, I mean, it also depends quite a lot to me on when my last meal was. I don't know how big of a difference it makes for you guys, but to me, I can sometimes even feel like I'm waking up bloated. So on those days, my morning weigh-in will be pretty high, and sometimes I think the largest one I've seen was like almost like 4 kilos. This was in the summer, mind you, but and I definitely do feel like super depleted at the end of my workouts in the summer, because like I'm sweating a lot, like to walk there and to walk back already. And then
4 kilos between when and when?
Morning weigh-in and after the gym.
4 kilos lighter after the gym?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so like that was during a time when I remember the specific, like I would only drink like protein shakes, basically like up until post-workout meal time, which would be like 7-8 hours after waking up. So
you had no food volume,
that's,
basically.
That's still shocking to me. I would never be lighter later in the day. Like even just from water, like I would be heavier.
Intermittent fasting times I do find myself lighter too, but I mean 4 kilos is a ton. But like to Abel's point, like I could wake up at 187 and then fast all day and just drink water and like electrolytes or whatever, and by 4 p.m. stand on the scale and be 3 pounds lighter than my AM weigh-in.
The lightest I am is when we go out, and I will have like some drinks as well, and then like I come home like holy shit, like and that's when I see sometimes the most shocking weigh-ins. Or again, like I'm not as neurotic now, so I don't really weigh in like not in the morning anymore. But like I used to do this, and like let's say I would be like 82, that would be like my general weight, and then like I would see something like 78 or something on the scale, and that's like it's for one, it's interesting because of just my case study, but also like it's just amazing that like there is your body and there's your average weight, and like okay, so like if I took out like all the food volume and like I got a bit dehydrated, like how much lighter could this very body be with the same amount of like tissue on it?
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean that's how all these wrestlers and MMA fighters will cut 20 pounds, and it's like the majority of that. I mean, some of it is fat and some muscle, but it's mostly food, bulk, and water. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
We have a steam shower in my house, and some mornings I'll go in there and do that before I weigh in. And it's like not even a fair comparison because it's like 2 or 3 pounds less just from sweating out.
Yeah. So. I definitely think it's a marker of neuroticism though, when you're weighing all the time. Like I think back to like, I only weigh in the morning these days, and I don't really think about it too much. But I know back when I like, probably the only time I ever had a quote unquote unhealthy relationship with food was back in like 2013 or so, 2012. And I remember I was like so hungry, and I would have planned to have a cheat the next day. And I would take my night weigh-ins. And if my night weigh-in was significantly lighter than like maybe like a previous night, I would justify it like, oh, well, I'm already light. I'll start it now, and then
Yeah.
then I could actually at least sleep. Otherwise, it was like, the next morning was Christmas morning and I couldn't sleep. So but I was definitely looking for a justification of like, well, I can start it earlier, and thankfully that
Yeah.
was a relatively short time. But I was like, oh, that's just not a good behavior to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually know that mindset. I've been there too. I've kind of gotten to a point now where I weigh in at night just because I think it's fun to see, because I can predict almost to like the half pound what I'm going to be in the morning based on what I am at night. Because the diet, like when you're dieting, you just don't have like enough food volume in your body for things to like fluctuate that much overnight. So it's like 2.5 to 3 pounds every time, whatever it is, at bedtime before the morning. So predictability,
Yeah, for sure. So you guys, we got a couple topics to go into. Like, what's a good one to start with? I definitely want to get to minimalist training because that's what we missed last time. However, I think a shorter topic that we can start on is the overhead press topic, just because. So in our conversations, Abel was like, yeah, I mean, I think we all kind of like understand at this point overhead press is not a good shoulder builder. And I was like, hold on.
No. That's not what I said. Hold on. Don't miss.
Abel said overhead press sucks.
No. I said like it's at this point it's pretty commonly accepted in the industry. That's what I said, I think. So it's like I don't necessarily think that, but enough people said it that are like even like big names that I'm like, okay, I guess that's the common stance at the moment.
Dante Trudell is screaming at somebody right now because he it's just like one of those, it's like, I don't know, it would be like, at least to him, probably the same as if you said like, yeah, I mean, it's commonly accepted that these days you only need 100 grams of protein. It'd be like, what? Like, because that was always like the whole thing. Like, you want bowler shoulders, like, you should be overhead pressing this amount. Like, if you're pressing 100-pound dumbbells, you're not going to have tiny shoulders, etc. And I do agree with that. I mean, for a while, I know even like Jeff Alberts had gotten completely away from laterals, and apparently that's not the case now or for a while. But I know there was a period where he was pretty much just doing pressing, whereas somebody like Steve Hall was the opposite. He was doing just laterals. He wasn't doing any overhead pressing. I was mostly just doing pressing. I actually only introduced laterals again with Steve, and I've since been doing them. But I don't really notice much of a difference. I have very, like, from the side, my shoulders are decent. From the front, they're very flat. I've just never had them like come out much, but that seems to be like, there's actually a picture of my brother and I next to each other. And within like 3 years, he had these like cap delts and looked wider from the front, even though he was probably, 15 pounds less muscle than me. But from another angle, it's very different. So it's not like I'm sitting here saying, wow, I have these great shoulders and I don't do laterals, but definitely overhead press has always been a staple of mine.
Yeah. Bryan, want to go first on this? Because I'm actually trying to find a picture of you to check out your delts.
All right, cool. So I think it's an interesting question because probably most people that do overhead press probably also do some lateral raises. Like, I know you referenced, Jeff Alberts and Dante. Does Dante like actually not do lateral raises, or is that like he
doesn't recommend against lateral raises?
Yeah.
But if you look at most of the exercise selection, it's like hammer strength shoulder press. Like it's a lot of machine shoulder pressing. Smith overhead press.
So I guess that maybe goes against my point, but I was going to say that like it's kind of a little different than the lat argument, because you could say like, well, all these people have developed lats doing like wide grip pull downs and bent over barbell rows for years. But you can't be like, well, they're probably also doing iliac pull downs alongside with it. Whereas I feel like with the shoulder press, to me, it feels like you can't completely separate whether overhead press is a good shoulder builder or not, because most people would do both overhead press and lateral raises in their routines. But as far as for me, like, I actually think that since I have been doing more specific, like shoulder abduction type stuff in the last 5+ years, I actually think my shoulders have gotten better. Like if you able do stumble across pictures of me from pre 2017, 16 type thing. I think that my shoulder development was probably not as good. It's a little ambiguous because of all of the trap-based stuff I was doing. So I guess like in some ways I was doing shoulder abduction via high pulling with Olympic lifting and stuff like that. But in like the early hypertrophy days before I even got involved in CrossFit, it was pretty much all overhead pressing as well. Like the first, 10 years of training was pretty much seated dumbbell overhead press and standing barbell overhead press.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that truly impressive delts with netties, it's just pretty rare to see. I feel like either way, like, yeah, Bryan, you have good delts, but I would say, and actually I would say I have decent delts as well. It's like one of my, I don't really have, maybe my chest is my best muscle group, but the delts are actually pretty decent. But it's so like truly like rounded, like kind of enhanced-ish looking delts are like rare to see with netties. And when you do see it, like you immediately notice it because it's so rare. And within those, actually the two I can think of now, which is Kino Buddy and Menno, they are actually both like huge fans of the OHP. They do laterals as well. So again, it's hard to tell. I think Martin Burkhan, like, I mean, who knows with that guy, but I mean, he has really impressive everything pretty much. And some, like, I even remember specifically at the comment section, like someone asked him, do you do laterals or just OHP? And he just responded laterals and laughing, crying smileys. It's like, of course I don't do laterals.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, but it's hard to tell exactly because of what Bryan is saying. Two points. So the one point is that the front delts are actually, I think they're a little bit underrated or a little bit unjustifiably, like almost like bashed on if someone is doing something that is emphasizing that more so, because actually the front delts add a lot, I think, to your aesthetic appeal, like especially from like a back double bicep pose. The well-developed front delts are actually a big part of how that's going to look. And I actually do notice that on myself now that I did regress on my front delts since I haven't been doing any OHP for a while.
You don't do any?
So I haven't done any in like a year now. But before that, it was always in there in some way. I was a big fan of these cable overhead presses, which I actually think that those are awesome. And the other thing I actually wanted to ask you guys, like, if you're thinking of, let's say, a barbell OHP, at which point of the movement do you think the side delts would be the most hit? Because I would think that it's like here at this point. Yeah. And for that reason, I would think that, like, wouldn't it be a narrower grip that would be better for that? Because, like, in that case, like, you're kind of doing this. If it's a really wide grip, then you can almost like skip this entire like shoulder flexion motion, like, because it's all like this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the medial delts like turn off when you're above this area, but I do think that you still want to make sure, like, if you had like partials for some reason just going like this, like, I don't think that would be that great, well, really of anything for a builder of anything, but especially like the medial delts there. I agree with what you're saying about it mattering from like the different angles there, but I also think, I mean, obviously everything is strongly genetic, but I have a friend, Kevin, who has great, very like capped delts, like relative to his size. And because of his shoulder problems, I don't think he hasn't overhead pressed like as long as I've known him, like forever. I don't think he does laterals either. I think he just changed chest and like it just works. But again, that's just more of a genetic emphasis. I'm not saying that that's what you should do. But I don't know. Just in general, it's hard to imagine somebody saying overhead press in general is not a good movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. For me personally, it was always welcomed whenever someone said that. I was like, well, I think I'll do it just in case. But like, I really wish that, or I really hope that that's actually not the case, because I might have to stop this at any moment, because that's the only serious injury I had in my shoulders. That was from a barbell overhead press, and it's not the movement's fault. I just fucked up. But man, like when I look at that Olympic freaking lockout that people do, like I have to turn my head. Like it looks so like holy shit. Like you're standing like this. It's like, what if your arms move backwards a little bit? Like what's going to happen to that shoulder joint? Jesus Christ.
You just dumped the bar. So I actually haven't done any overhead pressing probably in 5 years.
Wow.
Like I guess when I went through the CAS N1 stuff, I messed around with doing that like steep incline anterior delt press, as he calls it, where the dumbbells are 45 degrees, the elbows are tucked a little bit in the scapular plane. And so the thing is that caused me the same problem that the barbell OHP caused me, or the way that when my arms are abducted. It basically just, there's something that happens as I get within 4, 3, 2, 1 reps of failure, where there's like this grinding sensation in my shoulder as I like press through the sticking point. And it's like really disconcerting. Like I can actually like feel and hear this like grinding noise. And so I like tried to push through it for a couple of weeks because it didn't actually like cause pain, but it was so disconcerting that I just took it out after 2 or 3 sessions and really haven't done much of it. So I'd love to. Like I think that I don't think it's not a good shoulder builder. I just think it's probably not the best lateral delt movement specifically. But I mean, like I said, I used it the first 10 years and I think it was responsible for pretty much all of the shoulder development I had during that time.
Yeah, and I would also clarify that like if you are doing plenty of like flat or especially incline pressing, and then you add a bunch of laterals on top of that, you're probably fine. Like I'm definitely not saying it. I was more just saying that like it's hard to imagine people saying it's not effective, but I also think you can get that effect.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they would say it's zero. They would just say that to use like the Doug Brignoli like rating scale, like it would be like I don't know, like a 3 out of 10 for the side delts, 10 out of 10 for the front delts, and something like a lateral would be like a 10 out of 10 for the side delts. So, and stimulus to fatigue, especially, just don't mess with that.
Right. Yeah. So the other topic we were going to discuss that I just thought of this just happened yesterday. So it was talking about looking bigger when fatter. This kind of goes back to my video on like bear mode and whatnot. So I mentioned I'm 197 this morning, which is the heaviest I've been in a while. As far as a non-post refeed. Bryan, you're like 185, and then Abel, how much are you right now?
So I would be, I think, 195, right?
195. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that, and again, this is always like we have such confusing things between us. Like Bryan and you and I said are like identical strength, right? And but you probably have 15 pounds of muscle on me. And then like Abel and I, it's honestly even more confusing because we're the same height. Will be the same weight. He'll clearly be leaner than me, but yet like I'll have bigger arm measurements, bigger thigh measurements, bigger shoulders. So then I'll think, okay, but he's got like a smaller waist. But then you'll tell me your waist and it's like the same. So it's like, I don't know where the weight is. It's just strange. But I think you hold it like your face right now, 195 still looks pretty lean, man. I mean, I would have.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised to hear that, but thanks.
You hold it well. So it's just very interesting. And I imagine that in person, you look completely different than when you were, let's say, like 175. Like I'm sure you look much bigger in clothes, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
So
that I heard. Yeah. It's so I think actually like what's going on in my case is that I was like somehow not aware of this, but I might actually be one of the luckier people in terms of body fat distribution. I think that's it, because like I actually hold. So I snapped some pictures the other day, and I think I should still have it. I'll show you if I still have it. I took some of my hamstrings, and like we were laughing at how like Bryan looks like a 9%, like rest of his body and his hamstrings look like much higher, and like I'm pretty much like that as well, actually. So I'll just show you this picture. Okay, it's a little bit gross because or how gross is it that someone is hairy down there? Okay, so check this out.
Yeah, that kind of looks like mine.
Yeah. And so the rest of my body looks actually much leaner. Like I have a couple of ab veins even now.
Hmm.
So, and it's just, I think the reason I thought that I'm a typical male in terms of my body fat storage pattern is because I just don't have very like strong abdominal muscles that protrude through. So like I actually have to be like really lean to see them without flexing, for example. They're just not blocky. That's just their structure. And also I'm very prone to bloating as well. Like it's just, my stomach always has this like muffin top kind of shape. So it's because of those things. But in terms of the actual fat, I don't hold that much in my stomach. I hold way more in my back and then in the lower body as well. So I think that's it. And then also so I think our hips, or I don't know if we measured that, but I think we might have. But
at some point we have. I don't remember what they were.
But I think there it's safe to assume that that's narrower for me, and that creates like adds to the illusion of having a narrower waist as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely have some fat boy hips, but it's just it's so interesting to me. Like even with the distribution, it's not like I have these like shredded legs. That's like, oh, that kind of explains it. You know, they're just like kind of on par with everything else. But like looking at you right now, if I just looking at like face, upper chest, arm vein, and now you're telling me you have ab veins, I would have believed that you were like 185 based on how lean that is. You know what I mean? Like on appearance. So,
yeah, but it's also hard. So like, because we might be in an agreement of like how lean I look, but I know we are not in agreement about like how lean you look or how muscular you look. Because I remember like last summer, I think you sent me a picture. And I'm forgetting what you were weighing on that picture, either 200 or 190, one of those. And it's like, well, so for example, look at this. And you send me, I was like, well, I can see abs without flexing. So like, it looks pretty lean to me, but I mean, feel free to disagree. So
yeah, maybe I was humble bragging, like, oh, look at this horrible picture.
Yeah.
But anyway, the main point I want to bring up though is just that it's interesting, not even surprising, but just like how much bigger you can look to most people. Like there's a pretty advanced guy at my gym and he saw me, this was Friday, 2 days ago. And he's like, yeah, man, like, man, you're looking thick, like you're looking big. And I've pretty much just gained like pure fat. Like I don't think I've gained much muscle. You know, as we mentioned with like the Steve coaching videos, like I'm not any further along than I was last year and maybe even a little worse. But I had that 6-minute mile goal back. And so I was like in the low 180s. So he saw me during that period and he's seen me kind of bulk up. Excuse me, but I'm not really that much more muscular. And I told him, I was like, yeah, dude, I'm mostly just fatter, but he just sees a bigger guy. And that's just how most people see it, especially in clothes. Like I had a patient comment on my physique the other day, and the reality is like I feel like quite soft. And obviously, like I have a better physique than the average person, but I'm just saying, like it's funny how the average person will just see you as like more and more muscular up into almost like a surprising point. Like I've seen people comment on guys who are like 20+% body fat and they'll say like, oh, like, you know, he's like really big. He's pretty jacked. And I'm like, dude, this guy's like kind of fat, like actually fat. And the people, like a lot of average people just say like, wow, like, you know, they're just really big. So not to give people like an excuse to just get fat, but I do think that for most naturals, like if I had to choose between, you know, being kind of skinnier and lean or being bigger and like appearing bigger, but softer, I'd probably go with the latter in most cases, not even counting all of like the benefits as far as like your mood and libido and being able to eat more. Like that for sure kind of takes it. But even that aside, I think if you want to look like you lift, for most naturals, like being 15% generally looks more impressive while you're in clothes, you know?
Yeah, it's I agree that you like in clothes, at least you're like my arms. I look like I have arms when I'm fatter. So that is great. And I know, so I've heard it enough from like non-lifters, like little compliments and really surprising ones. Like I remember when the COVID stuff began, and that's like I was maybe in my worst shape, like in the last like 5 years at that time, and so I put on quite a bit of fat and everything. I remember going over to my in-laws and the father looked at me and he said like, wow, like he never looked this good. He said it to like everyone else in the room, and I was like, what the hell? Like how? Like I never looked this bad, and that's not even a question. Like it's objectively true. And the thing is, like for me personally, I would actually still pick the leaner look because, like, for one, like I just hate some of the sensations that go with it. With my shirt off, like I just really don't like the look that I have, let's say at like 20+%. And also like facial aesthetics, like and some weird things that I cannot quite explain, but I'm like, what's the name? Nicolas Cage, I think, the actor who like can never have a good haircut. So I'm kind of like that as well. But I swear to God, like when my face is leaner, even that's better somehow. Like it's if I had this same hair that you're seeing here at like, I don't know, 5 body fat percentages higher, I guarantee you would not look this good. So I don't know.
I actually,
go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, I agree with Abel on almost all of his points too. The facial aesthetics was going to be one that I bring up because, like, so at about 195, I feel like I look my best whether I'm like clothed or almost even like not like without shirt too, because of the way that like my body fat patterns are and stuff like that, where it mostly goes to like glutes and hamstrings. So 195 for my upper body is actually kind of similar to like 185 for my upper body right now. Anything above 195 though, as I start approaching 200, 205, I feel like then it kind of goes to like my face for sure. Like this right here becomes like a little more droopy and it's like fatter in the cheeks. And like, I don't like the facial aesthetic piece. And then I also think that some of the fat starts to fill into like my upper body in like almost a bad way, where the vascularity that I have at 195 ish in my like arms and stuff, that even begins to disappear, and I'll like lose my bicep vein. So even in like a t-shirt, I look like softer, you know? So anyway, those are kind of my thoughts there. Like, I think up to a point, it does help. And then, and I'll also add that non-lifters all prefer the leaner look for me. Like family members and friends and like everybody, when I'm 185, they're like, oh, you look so great and so healthy and like blah, blah, blah. And then when I'm like 200, they're like, oh yeah, you just, you clearly like dessert or whatever, like comments like that.
So I should clarify, because I think maybe my stance was a little bit too one-dimensional. There's definitely a lot of nuance to it. So for one, when I said like it's almost always for a natural, more impressive, I should say like from a size standpoint of how like big somebody looks, I'm definitely not saying that you will look better overall, like aesthetics or anything like that. Like I said with the roundtable with Jeffrey Verdi Schofield and Alpha Destiny, I said almost universally, especially in pictures and facially, you will look better the leaner you get. And again, that's maybe stops at like sub 8% body fat. But yeah, facially and in pictures and with a pump, it's better when leaner, no question. But I'm just saying to the average person, like it literally happens every single time I ever bulk up or cut down. The comments stop when I cut down, or the comments are like, oh, you stopped lifting. And when I'm bulking up, it's like, wow, like you're really looking big. Like it's like they forgot what I used to look like last time I was bulked up. So I just mean from like a physical impressiveness. I also think that's hugely dependent on muscle mass. So something I used to say is, I wish I had enough muscle where I only looked better while dieting. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say you take an enhanced guy who's like 230, 15% body fat. At that point, you're so big that to most people, you're just going to keep looking better and better, because not only are you getting leaner, but you're not looking fat. I mean, the reality is, I think a lot of people forget this, but to an average person, a lot of people just see size. So I know people who might, like, if you showed an off season, even if like 12% body fat professional bodybuilder to a lot of people in clothes, they'd think they were fat, right? Because they just see this big body. And so when I say like they'd only look better when dieting, I mean, it would continue to improve and improve, versus like somebody like me, kind of lanky. There's a point where like sub 12, I'm like, I just start to look skinnier and skinnier, not better. Now, Brian, you're kind of in between the two, where like there are enhanced people who aren't even your size. So I think for somebody with your size, the leaner you get, it is going to keep looking better to a point. You know what I mean? I could see that bias. You're also a little bit shorter than me. So your body type is a definite influence on that for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely a point too where I'm gonna, if I do get lean enough, like if I get another 5+ pounds below where I am now, I think I'm gonna be like the incredible shrinking man, kind of like you're saying, where I just kind of look like I'm just gone, like where'd all the muscle go type thing, unless I'm basically half naked.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's also a middle. The middle ground is very tough because you don't look that different at like 13% and like 16%, but you can look smaller. And I'm very rarely on the other spectrum where like I'm so lean that just like relaxed looks good. Um, but you definitely see those people where like, oh wow, you're not even that. Like I'd be curious about the guy who sent us the pictures this morning. I don't know how much he weighs, or he might have told me, but I don't think so. But he looks great because he's relatively tan and lean. And so you see that and you're like, you could just stand there, relax. Like you basically look like an Abercrombie model or something like that. But if this guy told me that he's like 5'9" and 165, I wouldn't be like, I can't believe that. You know what I mean? Like it's not like he's like so big, but he looks fantastic because he's lean enough. But that middle ground, like if he gained 10 pounds of fat, he might look like do you even lift, right? Because the things that start to get softer and whatnot. So
Yeah. But I definitely also like it's very observable that with some people it is like with me. Like I think being leaner just generally improves me aesthetically, down to a pretty low body fat percentage. With some people, I think it's like pretty unanimously agreed upon, or would be agreed upon. I think if we made people vote, that they just look better at a slightly higher body fat. Like I think one example is Mario Tomic, for example. Like I mean, don't get me wrong, I think he looks awesome. Like he's I think actually one of the best like netty physiques that I know, that are like not complete freak shows, and he looks great when he's lean, but like when he's at like let's say 15% or something, so like 80 kilos plus, I think he just looks even better. So it's
yeah,
and I don't know what is it about it. And even when I'm looking at like the face, like that's also interesting. I heard it, and Mario is obviously not an example of this, but I think my mother said, and then I had to conclude that she's right, that above a certain age, it just doesn't treat people's facial aesthetics well if they are very lean. And the first example I really noticed this on was my father-in-law. Like he's like 55 or something like that, and he looks 45. Like he just has this very youthful look, and he had some like complication or something, and he lost a lot of weight. And I saw him, and I was like shocked, like why does this guy look so bad? Like I don't know, like he usually looks so much better. And then I realized like because he lost a lot of weight, his face is a lot leaner, and it just made him look like older and just less like with like less vigor
More
in that
haggard.
person.
yeah. Well, that's definitely a
Yeah.
thing. I mean, people do lose volume, and that's why you see all these women with all this filler in their face because they're trying to get the volume of youth back, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
How do you guys feel about biofeedback as you diet? Because I feel like I'm almost in this like glory stage right now where I have lost weight, but not so much weight that biofeedback has really tanked. And in many ways, it's actually improved. Like I feel much better at 185 in a lot of ways than 195 or 200. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like up to a point, you begin to feel better when you diet until it gets worse type thing.
Mm.
Well, first let's define biofeedback for
So
everybody.
I'm sleeping better. My Apple Watch is telling me that my HRV is quite improved, and I have more energy throughout the day. I'm more focused. I am less. I feel like life in general is less laborious. Going for walks feels less like I have to put one foot in front of the other, and more like I am just like walking on air type thing. And that's kind of been progressively getting better as I've lost weight. And then just maybe in the last week or two, as I've gotten to this 184 number, there have been moments of, oh, this is kind of diet fatigue type thing. But the first 10 pounds, it was like everything just got better and better every time I lost more weight.
Yeah, I would say it depends on like what I'm looking at. So hunger be starting almost immediately. So I guess if I'm like really full, if I was like pushing a bulk, I would say, yeah, I guess part of me would say no to most of that because I don't like push a hard bulk anymore. But if I was, then yeah. I would say my biggest thing is sleep starts to get worse relatively quickly. Libido like immediately drops, although I actually like that. I'd like prefer that. And then I would say the main thing I would say is a benefit is I do notice like feeling lighter, like improved cardio. Like things just become a little bit easier in that sense. So it's not, I wouldn't say things are better, but I'd also say they don't get too much worse for the first like 10 pounds or so.
Sleep has been like insanely better almost immediately since I started dieting. This is actually, Abel, I think you and I may have addressed this after Dave left last time, right? Yeah. So basically, I was saying that like we were talking about how eating big meals at night like really affects our sleep, that it like heats up our body and we're restless and all this stuff. So as soon as I made the decision to start dieting and started stopping eating at 6 and no water after that, and smaller meals throughout the day and all this stuff, like sleep just like clicked for me. I've been waking up 1 or 2 times a night and it's just like briefly, like either to pee or to roll over, and then I'll go back to sleep. Whereas when I'm just eating at maintenance or slight surplus or whatever, I'm up 3 to 5 times a night, and oftentimes I struggle to fall back asleep.
Yeah, it's for me. Okay, 1 second. Sorry, I'm just closing this bullshit. So for me, I have a sweet spot range. And for example, right now, I think I'm at the very low end of that. Maybe even like slightly under. But to me, it's, if I had to say like a body fat number, I would say like maybe 13 to 17, 18, something like that. But so it doesn't apply to everything universally. So for example, now I definitely notice that walking is a lot more pleasant, like Bryan is saying. Libido, it's, to me, I've not managed to get to such a high point in body fat to where I felt like it was not still getting better. To the point where like, so I'm not actually so my penis size shrinks when I'm dieting, which is a good thing, because just kidding. No, when Dave said that thing about the libido, I immediately decided that I will have to say this.
So pausing on that though, because to me, I'll hear these like ads of guys who are 50 and they're like, oh, like I want to get my libido back, and I feel like there's a lot of analogies there with like food and whatnot. But to me, I guess if I was so full all the time, maybe I'd say, oh well, I want to be hungry again, right? But for the most part, it's like I would almost never say I want to be really hungry. And like similarly, I'm like, I don't want my libido even higher. Like I feel like it's a distraction. Now I say that as a healthy 30-year-old. So maybe if you're 50 and things aren't working, like maybe it's just different. And I remember Steve Hall actually said that too. Like when he went on, he was on TRT for a short period of time, and he was like, it was horrible. It was all I could think about. So I don't know where you guys stand on that, but
I mean, I think for me, it's very simple. It matters if there is like some kind of an emotional pressure on me because of the lack of it, which can be a problem if you're in like a new relationship or something. Or like, let's say if I was like a younger guy that like goes out a lot and like I'm trying to have experiences and like have some like one night stands or whatever. And like, okay, so like I do everything right, like, arrange the circumstances so that I could have those, and then I don't have libido, like then that would be an issue. Or for example, when I was dieting down to my photo shoot and like zero libido, and then we didn't have sex for like 3 months or 4. Wow. So like that's wow. I mean that was harming the relationship. In these instances it matters, but yeah, otherwise like not like if it works enough so that like we have a healthy sex life, then I don't want an even higher one.
Mine is pretty moderate, I would say, almost all the time. I don't really notice a change when I diet or don't diet.
Really?
And my labs seem to show the same, at least as far as testosterone goes. Like it doesn't really change when I'm at maintenance or surplus or end of a diet. It's all pretty much around 300 plus or minus.
Your testosterone, total testosterone?
Yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating to me because to me, my testosterone doesn't change that much when dieting or bulking, but my libido is like directly tied to how much I'm eating. Like, and you know, evolutionarily, you could say that makes sense, right? Like you have more of a surplus. And so, but I mean, literally it could be like within a month of dieting, even if other things haven't happened yet, like I'm sleeping good, like it just immediately drops. And then when I'm bulking, it's like we joke about it because it's like, oh, like Dave's bulking, like, you know, there's just like a clear difference. So it's like directly tied to calories for me.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't really notice too much of that. I mean, I also think that my life is filled with a bit of psychological stress with raising two young children.
You got two kids, it's a little different.
I mean, it's just like a whole slew of things. Like by the time, you know, 8:30 p.m. rolls around and we finally get the kids down and we've been up for 15 hours, it's like,
right.
To me, I know for sure that I'm at the very high end of my like okay range is when I just actually stop enjoying food. So like when we go out and have a really incredible meal, like as you know, like it has a hormonal effect on you, like an actual like a cognitive, like almost like a smart drug in a way, or like alcohol or something. Like it's not just that it tastes good, but like it actually enhances your mood. Like and I notice this the most when I'm cutting, and then if I eat like some meal with fruits and things like that, so not even high carb, like moderate carb, like I can actually notice those effects like on my mood immediately because I'm just that sensitive. That it gets to a point where I'm all like too high in body fat, where I'm eating like even the tastiest meal and it's just like stops having that effect on me. So like that's, if that happens, then I know for sure, like, man, like what the hell are you doing? Like you knew that you shouldn't be this heavy, but now it's definitely the case.
Yeah. So you guys ready to talk about minimalist training?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I guess we can talk about, you asked Abel some specific questions we can get into as well, but just in general, I guess the topic we're discussing here is there's two ways you could look at it. You could say, what is the minimal amount that I can do to obtain optimal results, like to really like get to where I would eventually be? And then there's, okay, what's the minimum I can do for a specific goal, which might even be maintaining, right? You could have everything in between, for slow progress, for no progress, but I'm really busy. And obviously the answer there is going to be different. You know, I wrote one other thing down there, which is the anecdote that like with specialization routines. And again, I think it's hard to use me as an example because I think I'm just like constantly pushing against that same level. So it doesn't mean it wouldn't work earlier in your training career, but I know I was doing one arm. I was trying to hit like a one arm pull up and one arm push up goal. Like obviously one arm push up is easier. So that was for a certain number of reps. And so like 3 times a week, I was doing all this volume for that. And there was no change in my left arm size relative to my right at all. And I mean, that was probably added like 9 sets per week of pushing and 9 sets per week of pulling. And there was no difference. So I think there's just, you know, there are some exceptions. I understand like the studies show all this stuff on volume, but it's very routinely heard that, or I routinely hear that somebody tried all this extra volume and it just didn't do that much. And they end up gravitating back towards like a moderate volume. And I've just personally never found for size, I have found it for like a strength from a technique standpoint. I've just never really found for size that all this extra added volume did much. And so then I guess with this topic, we're kind of working backwards of like, well, then how little do you actually need?
What wasn't one of Abel's questions, like, what's the least you could do to keep 80% of your muscle mass or something? There was some 80%
minimum number of lifts for somebody wanting to have 80% of their max physique, which is obviously hard to define, but
yeah. I can be more specific by what I meant. Just if you, while I'm talking, you want to brainstorm on this. I have 2 types of physiques in mind specifically. Like one is I would call like the Tinder physique. So it's the kind that like would never be a successful influencer or something, but it's like the average person looking at this. So like you go on a Tinder date and like you take your shirt off, and then later the girl or guy that you were with is like telling the friends like, and his body, oh my god. Like, so, you know, and if you're looking at like soccer players, I think those are good examples of this. Like they have like, they're lean, decent chest, maybe some arms, but like no delts. So like that kind of thing. So like you can tell that this is not a bodybuilder, but very much in shape. And then the next one would be like, let's say, yeah, you can actually even step on a bodybuilding stage. I mean, maybe you will have a few like things like, okay, you could work a bit more on that, but like you definitely belong on stage if you have the genetics for it. So make that a caveat. And also that you don't have some crazy genetic weak points. Like, okay, like I've just like super narrow shoulders. So like I would need a ton of shoulder work for that or something. So anyway, what were we saying before this?
Yeah, you were going over you were expanding on the categories. So,
oh yeah, but I know Dave wanted to leave that to the end,
okay.
so maybe.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's probably almost easier to define the 80% of your maximum potential, because once you start getting into like, oh, how much does it take to get that physique? Again, that's like so dependent on genetics that like you could say like, okay, so let's say like the Tinder profile versus like a bodybuilder, like Pascal from Revive Stronger, right? He is a bodybuilder now. He stepped on stage and he's put in an incredible amount of work. So you could say, oh, he's needed like all of this work to get there. But I go to like a gym now where I don't know, there's clearly enhanced people. There's clearly people with like, better genetics, et cetera. And I just talking to some of them don't work that hard and they look significantly more impressive, right? So like to say like to look like this physique, I think is going to be harder to define. But if you wanted to say 80% or to get most of your gains, that's probably an easier way to go about it.
Yeah, like so. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe I even said that, but maybe I didn't. Like, if you look at Steve Hall, for example, like now clearly he ascended to like the next level, or Eric Helms also made some improvements, but yeah, maybe Eric would be actually a better example because like Steve actually kind of looks like a different person. So Eric, like if you look at him on his previous competition or the first competition, 2007, I think, like you can definitely see if you're looking at like, okay, he has bigger this, bigger that, but like that person looks like a bodybuilder. So like, let's say with his genetics, like what would he need to do to get to that 2007 physique? Or that's still not any better than the previous definition?
No, I think
I get the question.
I think that's fine. I think it's lower than a lot of people think it is, because I think there's like a time component that a lot of people don't factor in. I always talk about this, right? I say, and I don't really hear many other people talk about this, which is that it's like, okay, so maybe something would get you there faster, but a lot of things would still get you there. So like, I think Bryan is probably almost certainly further along now than if he had just stuck with Max OT. Like I know that was the original influence of yours, right, Bryan?
Yeah, it was like 4 years in or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you took Bryan and everything else, like was like he was like, you have to train with Max OT and that's it. But you did this for 20 years and you bulked and cut and bulked and cut. And you had that huge stimulus that people often don't talk about, which is just the calorie surplus. I think you'd probably be within 5 to 6 pounds of muscle mass that you are now. Like I do think there's probably a difference, but it wouldn't be like the difference between you and me right now, having tried like a million things, is probably greater, significantly greater than the difference between you and yourself if you had done nothing but Max OT this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could even take it to a lower degree than the exercise variation that's in Max OT. Like, I think I could have probably done Max OT for the last 20 years and be almost exactly where I am right now. I mean, it's probably that close. Like 5 to 6 pounds might even be too generous.
I think it was. I just didn't want to be too aggressive.
No, like I think over the course of time, you could probably develop like almost all of your physique potential, call it 98+%, just doing the 6 main lifts that I always talk about, like a push-pull legs and a horizontal push-pull with a leg dominant movement and a vertical push-pull with a hip dominant movement. And you have 6 lifts there. And I think if you just did those forever, you would probably get to 98+%. And then I think as far as getting the Tinder body or the like 80% of your maximum potential,
Don't need
I
legs.
don't see, I don't see any reason you couldn't just do like dips and pull-ups and like single leg squats or walking lunges or like something along those lines. I mean, as simple as it gets, like almost purely calisthenic with like a little bit of leg work in there or something could probably get you to 80+% of your physique, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at, oh man, I probably won't be able to find it now, but maybe I can like send it and we can put it up on the screen. But if I look at my physique, like before I started lifting, so this picture that I'm thinking of was in high school. So on this one, I remember that I was strong enough so that I could do like 15 strict body weight chin-ups. And I don't know how many, but I was only doing push-ups and chin-ups at home without much structure. And if I'm looking at that picture, honestly, I would just need to be a bit leaner and I would pretty much have the Tinder body and just played soccer with my friends. So, I mean, legs were, I don't know how good, but so, you know, like, yeah, maybe the Tinder body is a little bit too low of a bar. But yeah, so legs and upper body both up pushing a pull, and so them four lifts basically.
As like you're saying, as the minimum for the Tinder body one, or the I think you need 6 lifts for the 98+% of genetic potential, because you have a horizontal push pull, a vertical push pull, and then you have a leg and a hip. Mm-hmm. So you have 6 lifts. I also think as far as the vertical push movement, I think you could have that be like a dip or an overhead press, and I don't think it really changes the end result anyways.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you and I are in such agreement, actually, Brian, because you do have, like in recent years, all this emphasis on technique and all the N1 stuff and all of that. So.
Okay, let me caveat this with a whole bunch of shit then, because we can sit here and theorize as much as we want about like, hey, Brian's just been doing max OT for 25 years, or Brian's been doing this like, you know, 2 times a week full body split with only 6 lifts for 20 years or whatever. But we have to look at sustainability as well. And so when you look at exercise selection piece, I wouldn't still be where I am right now, which is almost 40 years old with no nagging injuries on my entire body. If I would have trained that way, because I had those nagging injuries even 3 years ago, because I was still, you know, deadlifting and squatting and bench pressing and doing all those things that are part of those like core 6 lifts. Right. Mm-hmm. And that was even 3 years ago. I was constantly in pain, elbows and shoulders and knees and low back and stuff like that. And in the last few years of switching to this more specific exercise execution and selection piece, I'm completely pain-free. So when you look at that aspect of it, I think that adds a very important caveat.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a caveat. So so like it depends on like how we are discussing this. Are we discussing it like in a utopian, like kind of just theoretical space, or is it like what would actually happen in real life? And it's also like, it's a different question, like, you know, theoretically, like what types of movement patterns are like mandatory to build a certain type of physique if you have the genetics for it, versus, or to develop your physique to its like very close to its max potential, versus you know, practically speaking, like what will have to happen. So like, yeah, I think pretty much in agreement with you, like those muscle groups, I would actually say maybe I would be, so I think if someone did an overhead press, which is going to be great for like everything from like here up basically, and then some kind of a horizontal press, and a squat pattern and RDL, and did I say chin up already, or did I? Yes, and I would say a chin up. I'm not really sure if anything else would be needed on top of that.
If you take those 6 movement patterns that I mentioned, and instead of just nominally applying the most common lift to it, and you were to, like you're saying, get a little bit more nuance. So I'm like, okay, you need a squat pattern and you need like a hip hinge or a hip dominant movement. Well, that could be a pendulum squat and an RDL. and then you say, okay, I need a horizontal push and a horizontal pull. Well, that could be a chest supported T-bar row and a flat dumbbell press. And then it could be maybe it's a lateral raise instead of an overhead press for shoulders. And then your last movement is a vertical pull, and maybe it's a one arm, lined up cable iliac pull down or something along those lines. So just because those categories exist doesn't mean it has to be the most basic movement pattern. It can be maybe a little bit more nuanced, and then still that could be 6 lifts that get me to that point, and I'm also healthier.
All right, guys. So that's going to wrap up this part of it. Abel, we have the other part on your channel. So we'll obviously link below to that. People can go over there. Anywhere else, anything else you want to plug other than your YouTube? Your Instagram channel?
Yeah, maybe check out my current Instagram channel for the upcoming week at least. And that is called Abel Fit Stuff. I'm just planning to upload a cat video there today. So definitely.
Yeah, you're on like 2 weeks, I think, without getting deleted, right?
Yeah. It's maybe a new PR. So progressive overload with Instagram.
That's hilarious. Yeah. All right.